Wrestling Roundtable Radio is on the air at blogtalkradio.com/Wrestling Roundtable. Simulcast on Go Fight Live, and you can simulcast it on your site of choice as well, because you can get the embedding code on our account over at blogtalkradio.com, copy and put it on your blog, or blog, whichever you prefer. The number to call is 347-857-4647 to share your thoughts and opinions, which is what the idea of the show is. We want to hear all sides, not just the professionals, not just the fans, everyone. And speaking of everyone, I'd like everyone to visit WrestlingRoundtable.com. Huge news update earlier today, our pre-show news on Tuesdays, and catching up on all the latest goings-on mixed martial arts and pro wrestling. You'll also see that part one of our latest show is up, which is our discussion on the old school UFC. That's right, back in the SEG years. Some of the outrageous shit that was going on then with the lack of rules and even gloves in some cases. And, of course, as it progressed, as years went on, we saw the transformation of UFC as it started to get more regulated, and stars like Matt Hughes, Tito Ortiz, Frank Shamrock started coming in later on, as opposed to the earlier days of guys like Ken Shamrock, Dan Severn, Hoist Gracie, Tank Abbott, etc. But you can relive some of your memories of old-school UFC, as some of our fans have done already, and you can also find the links to all of our other social networking sites. We've got, I would say, a significant female following just based on the numbers and the pictures that I've seen between YouTube and Facebook. And not only would I think that this is the, let's say, combat sports talk show with the biggest percentage of female viewers, I would say, based on the pictures from Facebook, probably the hottest too. I would say they're stripper hot, but turns out some of them actually are strippers. But I think that should be the tagline for our future advertising campaign, the stripper's choice, perhaps, maybe not. But either way, speaking of females, one of our panelists, which I will introduce now, is a female, our special fan from Chicago, who's a radio correspondent, fan of independent wrestling, and some people said very biased, but after the introduction I gave you last time, Corey, about how we appreciate the enthusiasm and the passion you have for this show and spreading the awareness of the show, that you deserved our spot. A lot of good feedback for that. I'm sure you saw it.
Yes, I did, and I very much appreciate that still. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Corey. And we want to also welcome yet another fan who has joined the panel as well. See, that's the idea. Fans of the show get on the show. Will Brooks, how you doing, Will?
I'm good. I finally have some free time on my hands. Next week, I'm going to go back to the gym and get my skinny fat ass in shape.
Skinny fat ass, yeah, those are some interesting choice of words. Although Triple H may have something to what he's saying, because Punk has looked a lot smaller lately, in my opinion. But then again, if they really wanted to shoot, shouldn't Punk have said something like, well, maybe we can't all be exempt from the steroid testing like you?
I would have loved it.
Well, I guess that would be taking it a little too far. The other half of the Battle of the Wills series that is now on our circulation, Will Vafides. Hello, Will.
Hello, everybody. TLD is in the house. And remember, March 18th, 2012, the live show where TLD will be in action for all you fans. Now, I've given you plenty of time. You better all be there. And
well, where is it?
I'm happy to be here, too. Oh, it's in Jackson, right here in Jersey. So it'll be very close to all my Roundtable co-people. So it'll be wonderful, and I cannot wait for another great show from TLD.
Speaking of another show, some fans have been wanting to know when the next Battle of the Wills will be.
Eric, you should have the show pretty soon, so we'll definitely have it up for TNA's Hardcore Justice, so we'll definitely have a show. Probably I would say Thursday or Friday.
Awesome. Later this week, the next edition of Battle of the Wills. And speaking of the Wills, Will Brooks is in our chat room every Monday night during Raw. And someone who will be talking about Raw later on in the show is someone I'm glad to welcome back to our radio panel, Orlando O'Neill. Hello, Ollie.
Hey, what's up, everybody? How's everybody doing?
We're doing all right. And one last panelist to introduce, Rodney LeConte. Hey, yo, Rod, congratulations on getting your blue belt in jiu-jitsu this past Saturday. How'd that go?
It went very well. I really didn't expect it, and I didn't know that I was due for a blue belt. I just go in, I train really hard. I placed first in our school's first annual white belt tournament, and I'm very happy. You know, it's one of my proudest moments, I would definitely say, in the past 2 years.
Great, congratulations. And what else have you been working on lately?
Well, I just finished up a wedding that I shot. Just started editing a music video. A lot of things in the works right now.
Would one of them perhaps be this documentary on grappling I've heard about?
I don't know if you heard about it. I've heard something about that, but yeah, that could be in the works too. I've heard things. I don't know where people hear these things.
What's it called?
Speaking of documentaries, Eric, I finally watched Wrestling Road Diaries after you gave me a copy, and I really have to say that it was a great work. It was a great inside look on Danielson and Cole Cabana. It just really breaks that fourth wall. I mean, I didn't really know what to expect, but I think the way it was done, the way it was produced, the way it was shot, just the whole thing was just very entertaining. There weren't any dull moments. I just want to really congratulate you on the great work.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And if you read the news on WrestlingRoundtable.com, you'll see from the last update, not today's update, but the previous update, that we're talking about maybe shooting another. Although on our Facebook, I saw a picture from a dark match, apparently that's happening on SmackDown, that a certain Scotty Goldman or Cole Cabana or whoever was actually in. So who knows? That could change. But while we are giving everyone some time here at the beginning to get some plugs, I did want to get a very special plug in for someone who's a real unsung hero for the show. Her name is Suzanne LeGrand. We talked about the female fellowship that the show has, and she's been a real great friend to the show and a real great help behind the scenes. You don't even know how much she's done for this show, between helping with the production, helping with the ads, helping with the spreading of the word. She's even helped us shoot respect shows. So I wanted to give some help to her here because she has a website, SilentLilyStudios.com. That's SilentLilyStudios.com. Maybe it's not the right audience for this per se, but it was the least I could do to help pay her back for all the help she's done for the show. She's an artist. She does commission work. She does hand-painted jewelry and lots of other things. So check out her work at SilentLilyStudios.com, and if this isn't for you, send it along to other people who are into that sort of thing, artistic people perhaps, and people who just appreciate handcrafted jewelry and other things of that nature. So that's SilentLilyStudios.com. Now, let's get down into mixed martial arts, Rodney and Will Brooks, because this past Saturday was a Strikeforce event in Chicago that I know Pat from Illinois on our message board attended. He posted about it, and man, do I have a lot to say about what went on in the main event. But before the main event, the women's bantamweight champion, Marloes Coenen, lost the title to Miesha Tate. I just talked about what a great female audience that we had. Now I'm going to get sexist. What's wrong with me? But it was probably one of the hottest MMA fights I've ever seen. You know how people always say, Rodney, oh, MMA, it's just a bunch of guys laying on top of each other. Well, I was thinking, man, this is great, a bunch of women laying on top of each other in hot pink shorts. But that's not to take anything away from the exciting action that I enjoyed. I know you didn't think it was that great as I did, Will Brooks, but I really enjoyed the back and forth. And the fourth round submission with the head and arm triangle was the finish. Very nice moment for Tate, and possibly one of the torchbearers for the women's division of Strikeforce. But who knows how long that's going to last with all this Zuffa stuff going on and Showtime's deal running out in 2012. But let's not get into that just yet, because there's more on that later. Let's just see what your thoughts on the fight itself were, Rodney.
Miesha Tate did a really, really good job. She was really confident coming into the fight and really used her wrestling to take down Marloes Coenen. And we saw how Marloes Coenen tapped out Sarah Kaufman, and I really thought that Marloes Coenen was going to be the victor, maybe submit Miesha Tate. But to see the wrestler submit the jiu-jitsu artist who has never been submitted before was really great, really proud of her. And you can really see the the emotion after she won the belt. I mean, beautiful head and arm triangle from side mount, which I saw that and I was like, wow, and I started using that in training on Monday. I thought it was brilliant. I really agree with Miesha Tate saying that she could be the face of women's MMA. She's a really good-looking woman. I mean, people talk about Gina Carano, and she hasn't fought in over 2 years, and, I mean, that match can never happen unless Miesha Tate steps up weight classes, but I really think that she should be the new face of women's MMA if she continues to defend her title.
Yep, and hopefully she does, because like you said, that win and her celebration afterwards, very emotional moment. Up until then, I thought it was kind of an even fight. I thought the rounds were kind of back and forth in terms of scores, but she put an end to that. Don't leave it in the hands of the judges, and she did not. Will Brooks, your thoughts on Tate's victory?
I thought it was a really good fight. I enjoyed Grappling Wars, I really do. But you kept saying how much is an awesome fight, and I thought it was a good fight, but I don't want to put awesome on it. But I agree with you. It was nice back and forth. Tate really showed off some really kick-ass wrestling ability. Her takedowns were really good. And, yeah, her submission in the fourth round was brilliant. It looked great. Good for her. And, yes, she is hot. But as long as Cyborg is fighting, she'll never be the face of MMA. Female face of MMA, I should say. And Cyborg is the shit. We all know this. As good as Tate is, she will never fight her because of two different weight classes, and I don't think Tate's going to add too much muscle to her, or too much weight. It's not going to happen. It's like saying I want to see Miguel Torres fight Brock Lesnar. It's not going to happen.
Well, the latest is that, at least from Cyborg's manager, that they re-signed the deal. It's not been made public or official yet. That seems to be what people are getting the impression of, that Cyborg will be back sooner or later, and I really look forward to that. She really is the shit, like you mentioned, Will Brooks. But, oh, man, the main event. Someone who used to be the shit. What a fall. Fedor Emelianenko, his third straight loss. Could you imagine, Rodney, 2 years ago when Brock Lesnar defended the title against Frank Mir and everyone was talking immediately about, Brock and Fedor?
That is when Affliction went down under and everyone was talking about, oh my God, can they sign Fedor? And they said that he would be the next person to get the title shot against Brock Lesnar.
Could you imagine 2 years later that Brock would be not only out once again with the tuberculosis disease? Of course, he's got it taken care of, hopefully, but he'll be back in early 2012 at best. But he got trounced by Velasquez. Fedor is on his third straight loss, and they've all been different kinds of losses, too. He got submitted and pretty much knocked out this time. Last time was ref stoppage. But, man, going into this, Dan Henderson, I think Will Brooks, you're just going to agree with me here, really cemented his status as one of the top, if not the top American MMA fighter ever. He's got a win over a legend under his belt now. Still the light heavyweight champion, making his heavyweight debut. People were saying, man, Fedor got beat by a middleweight. And a lot of dispute about the ending, and I've talked about it enough. Even though I've got a lot more questions, I'm going to let you guys chime in for a bit here, though. And Will Brooks, what do you think about how it went down between Fedor and Hendo?
At first glance, I thought Fedor got screwed. I really did. I thought it was early stoppage. But when they showed it in slow motion on SportsCenter, you can see that uppercut that Henderson gives them, and you can see Fedor kind of fall flat on his face for a second. And at that point, I realized it was totally justifiable stoppage.
Right.
That being said, I know how the mighty have fallen with Fedor. I still would love to see him fight Randy Couture. I mean, I know he's retired. Fedor wants to retire. Just one more fight. I'd love to see them both go at it. I still think they can give each other a great fight for all the fans.
Well, that is the fight that was teased yet again on the cover of EA MMA that I guess we'll never get, because some people are saying, wow, if Fedor retires this year, we lost Couture and Fedor in the same year and we never got to see the fight. And I can't help but thinking, especially in light of what happened with Alistair Overeem, and you can get the details on WrestlingRoundtable.com, that Fedor is fucked. That was his last fight on his deal with Strikeforce, and there's no way in my mind that it gets renewed. Not only is it bad enough that it was after 3 straight losses, even if he had won, I don't see Zuffa, because that is the key thing here, re-signing a deal where they have to pay over $1 million to M1 because they were honoring the old deal, the previous deal that they were co-promoting with M1 for Strikeforce, but only $300,000 of that went straight to Fedor. The rest is pocketed by M1. I don't see even if Fedor had won this leading to anything good, and especially now that he lost, I think he's totally fucked. Well, hey, when they set up this tournament, people thought maybe we'll get Fedor and Overeem in the finals. Yeah, we might, except it might be in Dream later this year. But let's see what you thought of that fight, Rod, especially the finish, because I'm glad Will Brooks agrees with me. It felt for a while that I was the only one that thought it was stopped properly, aside from Herb Dean. Herb Dean said that when he watched the footage back, he agreed with what he did in the first place, and so do I. It looked like Fedor was out, and I don't think he was going to recover. It's kind of like, remember the second Ortiz-Shamrock fight where I thought maybe they stopped it a fraction early, but you know what? If they kept it going, it would have been the same finish anyway. So what do you think about the fight, the finish, and Fedor's future?
Initially, I thought it was stopped too soon because I'm always the first, especially if I see a fighter recover way quickly. I mean, especially with this fight, I always want to see it continue unless you know for sure that the fighter is completely done for. I mean, in the fight game, I mean, I mean, you could be hurt for a second, but there's always recovery, as we saw in the Chet Congo Pat Barry fight, and even in the Brock Lesnar Colin fight.
This is different though, because I don't think in either of those two fights, the fighter that you thought was out did a face plant with his arm limp on the canvas.
He did. Like, you saw his hips drop, you saw everything drop.
Right.
When I saw that, I was like, oh shit. But then he got back up, and he got a question. Well, Fedor was the main event. He should have let it go.
He didn't get back up. He turned around for a little bit, but I think
exactly. But you could see, like, you could tell it wasn't like Vanderlei where he was trying to. He thought the referee was the fighter. He looked like he was intact. It looked like he knew where he was. Like, he knew what was going on. I mean, the camera didn't show Fedor getting up or anything like that. So we will never know. We're not in Fedor's mind. Fedor believes he'll stop early. He feels he could have continued. Hey, I mean, that's his opinion. But I guess as a ref, your main job is for the fighter's safety. So in that case, once I watched it over and I saw the replays, if I was in Herb Dean's position, I guess I would have stopped it too. But as far as the fight itself, I thought it was a great fight. I don't think it was as good as Diaz and Daly, but I thought it was a great fight. I thought it lived up to expectations. But, man, I mean, everyone talks about Fedor. I don't think anyone's giving Henderson the credit that he deserves. Even though he didn't have the impact in his Strikeforce debut, I think after that with 3 straight knockouts, you really got to give this guy a lot, and you really got to put him on some sort of list. As far as the guy who was just a straight wrestler and now doesn't use his wrestling in MMA, basically a middleweight who stepped up and knocked out one of the greatest heavyweights ever, you really got to give it to Endo.
Well, absolutely. He controlled most of that fight by keeping Fedor against the cage. And, like, some people were saying this guy's a natural middleweight. Well, even if he is, Fedor still outweighed him by a good margin, and he had his back against the cage most of the time thanks to Dan.
Exactly. He had him in the clinch. That's a Greco-Roman wrestler. That's their pedigree right there. That's their territory. But even standing face-to-face, I mean, it wasn't like he was going against like a Brock or Alistair. I mean, they still kind of looked like they were the same size. But again, I mean, I think Henderson had a great game plan. Whatever organization this guy goes to, you really got to put him in another money fight because this really raised his stock a lot.
Yeah, it did for him, but definitely not for Fedor. So I mentioned Alistair Overeem before. He was the heavyweight champion, had only defended the belt once in Strikeforce. He had a contract. He ended up fighting in Japan a lot. They wanted him to fight in September in the semifinals for the World Heavyweight Grand Prix. He said no. Some people said it was because he was hurt, at least they claimed, and other people were saying it was because his management was trying to negotiate or play hardball for a new deal. Didn't work, and now the heavyweight title is vacant. So what do you think about Will Brooks is going to happen with the future of Alistair Overeem and specifically the Strikeforce heavyweight title? You think it's Josh Barnett's to win, or is Bigfoot Silva the big holdup, or is there going to be a black horse perhaps?
No, it's going to be Sergey. He's going to win it.
Well, he's also got a similar sort of thing because he has the same management, I believe, as Alistair Overeem. So a lot of people are thinking, we don't know how certain his future is because apparently he's advertised for a show in Russia in October as well, and people were thinking, well, this is probably going to fuck with his standing in Strikeforce.
I still think he's probably the best fighter left, though. If they do finish the fights, I think he's the favorite at the moment. Barnett, I think, has always been overrated. And Bigfoot, he's good, but he's not great. I think Sergey would take it if they continue the fight. Even after the tournament's over, they're still going to sign Sergey. They're still going to sign Alistair Overeem. Everybody else, I'm not exactly sure who they would sign, but they're the two guys who were pretty much favorited at the fight of heavyweight to get signed by UFC.
I don't know about that. I could see after this whole thing went down that I joked about it, but I could really see Alistair Overeem and Fedor end up fighting in Dream because Overeem is still the Dream heavyweight champion. I mean, who's he going to defend against, Rod? Todd Duffy? Fedor, people were saying this is what's happening now. Forget the whole getting old thing, or getting older in his case. He avoided top-level competition for years, and he was protected, and now we see what happens when he's in there with Bigfoot Silva and Dan Henderson. He's getting trounced. So what do you think about Fedor's prospects? Is it time to hang it up? Does he still have some potential left? And where would he live that out? Because I doubt it would be in Zuffa.
I don't think he should live it up. I mean, he still comes in great shape. He's still competitive. I mean, you hear the crowd reaction. I mean, we talk about how the language barrier in some fighters really keeps guys from becoming stars.
I don't believe it.
Like Anderson Silva, his numbers don't get the GSP or Brock numbers. And last time on the show, I talked about certain fighters when they fight, their fights have like that Mike Tyson aura.
Right.
Fedor's fights have that Mike Tyson aura, and he doesn't say a word of English. So I still think that there's still money to be made with him. There's still
in a comeback, you mean?
Exactly. You put him in another fight in December, regardless, people are still going to watch. There's no way that like people are not going to watch this guy.
You don't think he's been exposed at this point?
I don't think so. He got caught in a triangle. That's fine. The ref stopped it against Giant Silva, so even though we knew where it was going, it wasn't really decisive. He got stopped by Dan Henderson, which some people still question. So it was never like Vanderlei Silva instance where he lost like his last like 6 out of 8 and he just doesn't look as competitive as he once was. I still think he has a shot. I still think he has a lot left. I want to see him keep going. After Tito's big win last week, I'm very optimistic about fighters still having some in them.
You're right, and that's the thing, because Tito Ortiz's win proves you can never write someone off. And I made the mistake by saying that before he fought Ryan Bader, and look at him now. I'm going to see him fight on Saturday against Rashad Evans. However, just from what I've seen, I got to disagree with you, Rob, because not only did he get caught in such a basic hold, after having so many submissions under his belt, I figured he'd be able to handle himself on the ground. Even though Verdum's a world-class BJJ champion, after that one loss, you thought maybe. After several losses in a row, no less, it's starting to become a pattern, because when he got pretty much knocked out by Dan Henderson, I'm thinking, this is the guy that got practically his neck broken when he got dropped on his head by Kevin Randleman and came back like a second later to put him in an armbar. It just doesn't seem like the same guy, and I hate to say it, because unlike Jason Aledo, who hates Fedor for some reason, undisclosed as of yet, I'm a big Fedor fan, you know that, and like when I was watching the fight on Saturday, as he's coming into the cage, I'm thinking, man, this guy is such a unique, interesting character. I mean, you know I'm not a big fan of religious shit, so that Orthodox stuff he gets into gets pretty creepy to me, but he's a very humble guy, very quiet, and he's just got, I think, a likable persona and a likable aura. Like, when he got in the cage, I'm thinking, man, this guy I really want to see win. I like Dan Henderson too, but I think Fedor was in a real situation that he needed to win here, and he didn't. And I was excited the whole time, Rod. I mean, my heart was pounding, my palms were sweaty. I was getting really into it, because that's the sort of excitement that you can get from MMA or a guy like this sometime, but I'm just not seeing it right now. And I think, like I said before, this is something that people aren't bringing up a lot, that he's just in a really bad situation with M1, his contract in Zuffa.
Yeah, I mean, his personality, I mean, you saw right before he was about to get interviewed, even after a knockout loss, Gus Johnson stopped, and he just heard the standing ovation from the Chicago crowd before he spoke. And this guy doesn't even speak English. So this guy still has a following. He fights in Dream. His fights will still be reported. People will still be interested. Maybe he has to go to Dream. Maybe he has to go wherever he can, build his confidence up, maybe fight lesser competition just to prove to himself and others that he still can hang with pro-level athletes. He's only 34 years old. He has at least a year and a half, 2 good years in him. I'm not the one to, if someone loses a few times in a row, to say they should retire, because people have bad strings. People go through roller coasters in sports and life. I feel like if you can continue, if you have the will, if you have the body, then you should really go for it, because it's what you do. It's how you make a living, and it's what makes you happy. And if fighting is what makes him happy, then I'm not going to be the one to tell him no.
All right. Well, speaking of Dream, one last item before we move on from mixed martial arts. We joked last time, Rod, I think you actually made the joke that UFC might be running New Year's Eve. Now, of course, that was just based on nothing, just a joke. But Dream 17 is coming up in September, and the first 5 months of the year, it seems like FEG is still going through financial trouble, and Dream is just like, all right, we're going to do our own thing. And I think it's primarily goofy. I mean, they just had a bantamweight Grand Prix, and now they're going to have a bantamweight tournament to crown a champion. Why wouldn't you just crown the champion with the winner of the previous tournament? Why do 2 tournaments? I don't get it. But their show coming up in September, Dream 17, the lightweight champion, Shinya Aoki, who American audiences have seen in Strikeforce and not do too well, will be facing Razor Rob McCullough, and it's a non-title bout. I'm really getting fucking annoyed with Shinya Aoki. He hasn't defended the belt in the last several fights. He's really getting under my skin. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but what I wanted to say is that I've said before strategically that I think it'd be wise for UFC to unify all the belts between Strikeforce and UFC, have roaming champions, and then make Strikeforce, what's their appeal going to be then? Make it the tournament brand. We just talked about on the SEG Years video that is on YouTube right now that you'd like to see one-night tournaments come back. I think that tournaments would be a great counter to Bellator because everyone seems to be hearing the rumors and seem to think that Bellator is going to be taking UFC's place on Spike TV pretty soon. UFC still up in the air with their negotiations with everyone. Doesn't seem like they're going to renew their deal with Spike. Bellator could be taking their place. I think the tournament idea for Strikeforce could be a way to counter that. But your idea of a New Year's Eve show, of course, Japanese MMA has had New Year's Eve shows for a long time. It used to be a staple of pride. Dana White said they're going to go back to Japan this year, and if they are, I think it'd be really good for the Japanese audience who hasn't seen a UFC show in forever, for the international audience, to have a competing card that night. I mean, Dream is not in the best state. We've seen their roster. It's ridiculous. K1 is practically non-existent at this point. Sengoku, we've heard about their problems if you've read the news on WrestlingRoundtable.com. This could be the death blow that they might need for Zuffa to get their hooks back into Japan. What do you think about UFC's international strategy going forward? They are doing a Brazilian show in a few weeks.
I think it could work. I think that would be a perfect card to feature such stars as maybe Krokop and Vanderlei Silva.
Well, they are also signing a lot more Japanese fighters now that they have the lighter weights too.
Exactly, Akiyama, and I think it would be great, and it's especially if they start to acquire some of the Strikeforce Japanese fighters, and Scott Coker has done a lot of work in Japan. It could work. I would really love to see UFC in front of a Japanese audience, and just the difference. I mean, it would not be the typical Vegas crowd. I think people who really don't understand the Japanese culture of things might be thrown off, but I think fans who know how Japanese react to things and the excitement to have for more of the groundwork, I think it'll be great. Definitely look forward to that.
That's going to do it for Mixed Martial Arts this week. We're going to move on to pro wrestling in a minute. No news this week. You can find out the latest news on mixed martial arts and pro wrestling if you go over to WrestlingRoundtable.com. Huge news update with all the latest business deals and legal cases and health problems and upcoming shows, media appearances, and all the other shake-ups and goings-on in the world of pro wrestling and mixed martial arts. But we are going to read some poll results. And one of our latest polls was, where will CM Punk's belt end up next? Only 2% of you voted for the moon. Hey, the moon is awesome, but maybe there are some better choices, because I didn't vote for the moon myself. 7% voted for next to Waldo. I guess once it moves from his kitchen and Comic-Con and wherever else, it could end up anywhere like Waldo. 13% of you said a Pepsi factory. 18% of you said under Corey's bed. What would it be doing under your bed, Corey?
I have no idea.
Oh, yes, you do. 28% said in Colt Cabana's refrigerator. I guess right next to the JCW belt. And 32% of you said in a Ring of Honor. I wonder if you're still thinking that right now. And to discuss that and everything else CM Punk that's been going on, returning to our radio panel, Lawrence Haber. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Eric. I guess you saw me in the queue. Hi. Hello.
That's my job.
Good evening. Like Bela Lugosi. Good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Doing well.
And
doing well.
I'm glad you're doing well.
Doing good and doing well.
I'm glad you're here to talk about what's been going on in pro wrestling. Of course, the big thing is CM Punk. Before we get into what's actually going on, I just mentioned in a Ring of Honor, and people actually voted for it. And I meant to bring it up on the last show, and we didn't have the chance. So because we got plenty of time, I wanted to do it now. Because how is it that people, including the supposed experts like Meltzer and Alvarez, are talking about this sort of shit as if it's actually going to happen? Now, you don't have to be on the inside to understand it. Just using simple logistics and common sense should be able to tell you, first of all, why is it that the internet, by the way, Lawrence, all these CM Punk, Ring of Honor, WWE, ROH things that people are talking about, it's completely made up by the internet. It's not based on anything as far as, like, someone in the office said to this dirt sheet guy this, and this might happen. It hasn't even been discussed internally from what we gather. But yet, this has taken on a life of its own, and I think it's the first time that the fans pretty much fantasy booked their own Smart Mark Boner scenario, and it became pretty much what's going to happen. Now, there's two halves of it. One, everyone was saying, ooh, Punk's going to show up in Ring of Honor in Chicago. They've got a TV taping coming up. Why is it that he's not going to show up in New Japan? He mentioned New Japan in the same promo, but no one mentions, oh, he's going to show up in New Japan and defend the belt there. Maybe he'll show up in the Indies and defend the belts there to help further the angle. Well, we saw that didn't really happen. Okay, he showed up in AAW because it happened to be where he was and his friend was there. It's not like he was actually really supposed to be there, because if it was, they would have advertised it. Duh. You don't hide a big name like that when you're an indie trying to get exposure. But that brings us to Ring of Honor. So, okay, everyone thinks, oh, CM Punk's going to show up because it's Chicago. Well, first of all, SummerSlam's in Los Angeles the next day, so that pretty much kills it right there. But even if it wasn't, and they were going to further this angle, why would Ring of Honor do that? Because their show airs in September. Hello? What are they going to do, bring them out for just a promo, like a dark promo for the live audience? No. They do fine enough in Chicago by themselves. They're there to tape TV, and even if Punk was there, would they really want to put this guy on there to further a WWE angle instead of, concentrating on their own shit? This is a big deal for them. They're trying to get the name out there. They're getting started in syndicated broadcast for the first time, and you're telling me that they're going to focus on a WWE guy? Makes absolutely no sense. So if you have anything to chime in on that, Lawrence, now's the time.
Monday night, the previous Monday night spoke for itself as to the purpose of this entire storyline.
Well, yeah, that whole thing is dead right now.
Right. Well, the interpretation of everything you just said obviously isn't going to happen and was never meant to happen. If it did happen, I think it would have been a cool element to add to the storyline. It would have enhanced the suspension of belief that people had that this was part real and part not real. And like I had a conversation with you a couple of weeks ago, Eric, where I had said, how could anyone think that any of this isn't real? I mean, you don't even have to know the history of WWE or wrestling to just know that when a guy wins a championship on a pay-per-view, that it's part of a storyline. You know, this stuff is fake. You know what I mean? Like, Santa Claus isn't real. No matter how much we want to pretend, it was a very exciting storyline, especially the fact that they pulled the trigger on having him win the title in Chicago on pay-per-view and beat Cena. That was awesome. I wasn't expecting that. It was exciting. It was certainly the hottest angle that they've pulled off in maybe 5 years. Oh, maybe since the Nexus. I should mention that as well. And look how that turned out, by the way. Anyone who really knows this stuff shouldn't get their hopes up that any of it is real. You know, he went out there with a live mic on Raw about 3 weeks ago, and the first thing he did was plug the pay-per-view and remind you of the date and location, and it was never meant to be real to any degree in any way. Those elements were meant to just enhance this perception of this storyline. Now, I think that the real deflation here for the Internet fans isn't going to be that CM Punk didn't show up in Ring of Honor or anywhere else. I think the real deflation is going to be the deflation that I had last year when I got my hopes up with the Nexus, which is that the reality is the most you can hope for out of this storyline is that it gives CM Punk's character some more life and gives him a second chance in WWE to be something somewhat special. But ultimately, and you can see this already, their plan is, always has been and always will be, to keep the main focus, the main center of attention around John Cena, which is perfectly fine, and because he's their top star, and obviously Triple H. I mean, there's nothing more telling than the night after CM Punk has his big win in this big alleged universe-altering storyline. The next night, everything is focusing on the McMahons and Triple H. It's the invasion all over again. The focus goes right back.
It's the corporation all over again, with Triple H playing the role of Vince McMahon, Punk playing the role of Austin, and Johnny Ace playing the role of the Stooges.
Yes, pretty much. I mean, when I saw Johnny Ace last night on Raw, he did serve a purpose in the storyline initially when his name got dropped and all the Internet fans, including me, went, ooh, wow.
But now he's a character. I hope you're all happy.
But now he's a character. He'll be a recurring character, which makes him the equivalent of Patterson and Briscoe for the new millennium. And you know what? Maybe statute of limitations has passed, and maybe it's time to try and do that again to spark interest in wrestling by having the everyman, whatever, if you want to call CM Punk the everyman, that's your choice. But the quote-unquote, quote-unquote Steve Austin-esque blue-collar guy who isn't the typical WWE Superman character, feuding with his boss who gets everything he has through nepotism and wealth, and everything is handed to him. The difference between the Austin character and the Attitude Era's birth and this is that they, at some point, decided that they were going to push Austin as the single most important character on the show, and that's not what CM Punk is going to be. This is a very different time. And what I was going to say earlier was that they've already clearly shown that this is not just about Punk. It's about Punk, it's about Triple H, and it's about John Cena. For as much as I am a fan of Cena's and what he represents, and what I mean by that is not this common PG era. I mean, he represents a successful character who can carry the wrestling business on his shoulders to a degree, which is really what he's done the last few years. What I don't like is that CM Punk would not have a fighting chance to get over as the next Steve Austin, because right on his heels is always going to be this John Cena character who they still are going to push as the fan favorite, as the one that all the kids buy the T-shirts of, and it's just not going to be something that Punk could ever possibly compete with. And I'm not saying that the certain demographic that he's playing to, the 18 to 16 to 34 male demographic,
behind the keyboard.
Yeah, but right now that's not the bulk of the audience. That's not who's buying tickets and buying the merchandise. And you could tell by the reaction that the Mysterio Cena match got the week before that realistically that's the type of direction that will help them go back into a boom period, because that's their current audience. Basically, that match is kind of the real equivalent of modern day. No one's going to buy this when I say this, but I'm just trying to draw an example, analogy. That's like the Ultimate Warrior Hulk Hogan match of this generation of kids. So that's what they want to see. And when I saw that match and I thought of it outside of the context of the CM Punk storyline, I said, wow, that match could have been the main event of WrestleMania. It was a great match. It had a good finish. The fans totally bought it, all the fans, old and young alike. And while that match was happening, yes, a lot of the fans that are in our age were thinking, what's going to happen with CM Punk? But most of the world that was watching that match in the arena and at home was thinking just about the fact that John Cena, who's a big fan favorite, was fighting Rey Mysterio, who's another fan favorite.
See, so that's the thing. I had a thought earlier when you're mentioning the world and how it's a much different place. Firstly, it is a much different place. This era that they're trying to recreate essentially is, like CM Punk said, I don't want this to be the Attitude Era. This is the reality era. But they're pretty much doing it essentially the same way as far as dynamics go. And I don't think you can spark that by doing the same thing over again.
Well, and Eric, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to, because I was rambling.
No, you're not.
About time for me to get interrupted. I do want to make one more point about Punk. In the Attitude Era, all of the characters started having that Austin attitude and like were cursing and talking about real stuff, whereas CM Punk is like an isolated incident, if you will. Like everything else on Raw the last 3 weeks has been the status quo, which is kind of like the same thing that happened when the Nexus came in. Rob had a great comment I'll never forget. He said, if Wade Barrett shows up on Raw the week after the Nexus invasion and says, I'm Wade Barrett, blah, 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 it kills the storyline, and that's exactly what happened. And the fact that right after the Punk storyline, they went right back to the status quo, it goes to show you that they're not invested in it. It's not like, and I know we're going to talk about this, it's not like the NWO or the Attitude Era with Austin, where the whole show there was like an interwoven storyline that it was kind of having an effect on everything going on and all the characters. Back then it was like Marvelous Mark Marrow now was becoming this lunatic, and Sable and Goldust was doing his thing, and DX, and for those of us who remember that, all of these characters that we kind of grew up with as being cartoon characters were now becoming more realistic. They were getting the Vince Russo treatment. And that effect, at least in the first 3 weeks since the storyline happened, and maybe it could change, but it doesn't look like it will, has not taken effect at all, has not changed. Certainly, all you have to do is put on SmackDown to know that on that show, nothing has changed. I mean, I know that Raw is the only thing that matters, but on SmackDown, there's no CM Punk effect. It's just a generic feud there with Christian and Orton, which is a perfectly acceptable thing, but there's no change there. It's Mark Henry, it's Sheamus, Ezekiel, it's Jackson, it's all those guys, the typical McMahon guys. So unless they're planning on really changing things, you would notice, you'd see trends in the way things are coming across.
Well, as far as the world goes being a different place, I wanted to say that this is a digital world now. Back then, there was no YouTube. The Internet was a big presence, yes, but they also have really sunk in their teeth as far as the international market goes. And you know what? As niche as I think a lot of this shit is for the inside Internet fans in America, maybe some British fans because they're also an English-speaking country, or Australia, how is this translating to India? You know what I mean? Like, they want to get a foothold in China, and I don't see this being a universal appeal sort of thing.
How does it translate to people who don't know who John Laurinaitis is or don't remember?
That's what I mean.
Brock
How are people in fucking Japan or South America supposed to get that shit?
Yeah, or people who are watching with you or me who watched wrestling in the 80s and 90s but never looked at the Internet. Nobody remembers Johnny Ace, much less his real name. You know what I mean? It's just, Cena mentioned on Monday something about, he used to carry a skateboard. I'm a quote-unquote smart fan, right? Like, I read the dirt sheets and all that stuff, but I barely remember Johnny Ace in the, whatever it was. The
dynamic dudes, yeah. Who's going to fucking remember that?
I don't even remember that. It's one thing to talk about Triple H and Stephanie, because that's like an ooh-ah thing that everyone knows. Even the kids know about that whole deal.
Right.
But nobody, like, what kind of interest is that going to draw? That some guy in a suit gets made fun of by Cena? No different. This all is going to end with Rock and Cena at WrestleMania anyway, and Punk is not in the picture there. So unless something drastically changes, the plan right now, from what I'm seeing, is not to change the way they do business and run the show. The plan is to give CM Punk a new babyface character. And it's horrible to say, and it sucks for a lot of people, including me, because I saw a lot of potential, but that's what I see, is that he might win at SummerSlam, or Cena might win. But ultimately it doesn't matter, because the most mileage you're going to get out of this is a Punk Triple H match at WrestleMania, and that's probably as far and as big as Punk is going to go, because he probably would have done something as big as this already in his career, and it might just not have the juice that people are, no pun intended, that people are expecting.
Maybe I'm completely wrong about thinking, what about the international markets, but I think they probably would care. Maybe I'm wrong, because all the wrestling booms that have started really started in America for American audiences, so maybe I'm wrong. But with that in mind, I don't see how they could be starting a boom by doing the same thing essentially as Austin McMahon 13 years or whatever before, because don't they realize that what they need for a wrestling boom is Hulk Hogan? But
right.
Jokes aside, back to the ROH thing. This ROH shit hasn't even died yet because people are like, well, they're going to start an ROH faction with the Kings of Wrestling and Tyler Black and put them with Punk. And why the fuck would they do that? It's what we were just saying about it being a very different world, Lawrence. 13 years ago was the last time that the WWF title was defended outside the company, like people thought Punk would do. It was Bret Hart and Terry Funk in a tribute show in Texas, in Amarillo, that a few people bought the VHS of. You know what I mean? Like, back then, when they were down in the dumps, they were working with USWA, ECW, Michinoku Pro, NWA. They actually worked with people like that. It's not like that now. Now they run international shows, and their second quarter, the international audiences were down. They don't work with anybody. And 13 years ago, people knew what ECW was. People were, well, Vince secretly funded ECW, and maybe he's... No, there never has been, and especially now that Sinclair Broadcasting has bought Ring of Honor, I'm rather certain that it's easy to say there never will be a relationship with WWE, fucking period, okay? Like, even Meltzer was calling people around Ring of Honor and other people to find out if there was any truth to this shit. No, it's not. Like, okay, suppose... even if they did have all these guys lined up, which they do, why would they do this? For the internet? It's not like in 1998 when so-and-so, or 97, when anybody would show up, like Raven, let's say, on Nitro, and get ECW chants no matter where in the country they were. Everyone knew back then, because wrestling was hot. We just talked about on the last show how wrestling's not even hot. WWE practically isn't even hot. It's almost centralized with Punk. If they did that, you think there's going to be a huge ROH chant? No. And if they're going to do it with anybody, wouldn't it be with Cabana, the guy who's actually been mentioned on TV? Hello. But anyway, that's just some of the Punk stuff that's been going on, and I want to get everyone else in on this because the picture's become a little more clear in the past couple weeks. Cena and Rey had the title match on Raw after Mysterio won the belt from The Miz in the tournament finals. I thought the Cena-Mysterio match was really good. The transitions were really good, like the Punk match. Cena has done a really good job, even if he is wrestling through injuries, like some people have been saying. You wouldn't know it based on these past couple performances. Really good. The psychology was even good. I loved when he countered Mysterio's STFU by standing up and then picking him up for the attitude adjustment, and then his leg went out. It was great. And the crowd was really hot. Speaking of that being, like you said, Lawrence, a WrestleMania caliber match, I almost would want to jump on the bandwagon that says this should have been at SummerSlam. I think if they wanted to stretch this out a little more, do a couple other Comic-Con-esque appearances, Cena and Mysterio in Los Angeles, hello, would have been a huge SummerSlam match, and then you get Punk coming in afterwards with his Cult of Personality music on the second biggest show of the year, and you further your angle and hopefully get another buy rate off the B show that's going to happen in September. The numbers haven't come out for Money in the Bank yet, but maybe I'm wrong about this whole Punk promo that happened about a month ago or so. People were thinking this is going to change wrestling and it's going to be the next Austin 316 moment, and I just really wasn't getting that vibe from it. But you know what? Austin 316 happened in King of the Ring in June 96. He really didn't pick up steam as a character for much later on, so it could have much more long-term effects than we even know. Who knows? But as of now, the ratings have remained the same, and it's maybe wrong to say that because, like I said, long-term it could have an effect, but we're also spoiled into looking at, let's say, the Valentine's Day Raw, where Rock shows up, and it jumps up a full point and things like that. But, like I said, Rey and Cena was a great match, but it's leading to Punk and Cena, and it seems as if WWE is in a no-win situation. Some people were saying right after Money in the Bank, well, they got to put him back on the air because they got to keep it fresh in people's minds. They can't let people forget. And others were like, no, they got to drag this out and make it seem real and blah, blah, blah. So it seems like people are going to be unhappy and complain no matter what. But let's see what you guys think. Will Brooks, who, like I said, is in our chat room every Monday night during Raw talking with our fans as it's going on. What do you think about how this whole Punk storyline is played out with him coming back in the verbal exchange on Monday night?
I think he came back a little too soon. I would have had him off TV at least until September, at least. I would have had him going on talk shows, keep the Twitter pictures up of him like, oh, look at the belt, I put it in the trash can. Oh, look at the belt, I put it in my bathtub. All the stupid stuff like that, like he's really shitting on the belt and having fun with the whole thing. Then come back after Cena has built up a little bit more, and then have him come back like at the end of a pay-per-view or something, lead up to a big match at Survivor Series or something, you know? I would have CM Punk off TV for a good while before I would have brought him back. The problem is today everybody wants things so instantly, you know. No one's willing to be patient, and that kind of sucks. That hurts the TV a little bit. But as far as the verbal exchanges between Triple H, they weren't bad. I mean, like, I liked it. The one last night wasn't that bad. Again, the first one, even though it kind of went on for like about 25 minutes, but it was still entertaining, so I wasn't complaining. I've been loving the wrestling lately. Except last night there wasn't much wrestling, but I've been loving the wrestling lately on Raw. Even TNA's picking up the wrestling on lately. It seems like people are making wrestling the focal point of the show now, which is what they should have been doing the last couple of years. But they finally got it going. I'm very happy. I like CM Punk still doing the half-shoot kind of stuff. I'm enjoying it. I still think they pulled the trigger way too fast. They should have waited until at least fall and led it to a match at Survivor Series or something.
I thought the face-to-face that they had at the end of Raw where Mysterio lost the belt to Cena, where Punk came out and held his belt up, and Cena was raising his belt up too, but it was kind of at half-mast, so to speak. It's almost like they were trying to get across, like, he knows he didn't beat this man for the title. It was an interesting little psychological frame that they had. It's a good way to end Raw. So let's see what Orlando thinks.
Basically feel the same way about you guys. I thought they should have stretched out this whole storyline, this whole angle. I thought what you said was perfect. I kind of thought that that's what the WWE was going to do with the SummerSlam. I thought they were going to have CM Punk come out at the end. Cena would win again, of course, and then boom, they could start something new from there and involve Triple H in the angle, like how they're doing now. But I mean, I can't complain with what they're doing now. I haven't felt this way in years of, I have to watch Raw tonight, and that's how it's been with me for the past month or so, just because of CM Punk. So I'm kind of happy about that, but I do think they kind of jumped the gun and went into the CM Punk angle way too soon. I think they could have stretched it and got as much mileage as possible out of it instead of trying to condense it and trying to do it as soon as possible.
Well, that seems to be what everyone's saying, that they were really into it for the past couple of weeks, and it seems like half the people are still trying to be patient, and hopefully it plays out, and then the other half are like, oh, it's ruined. But let's see what you think in a little bit. The number to call, 347-857-4647. We'll be going to your calls in a little bit. Right now, Will Vafidez.
So they have to sell a pay-per-view, and SummerSlam is their second biggest pay-per-view of all time. The reason why they didn't do the CM Punk John Cena match is because of the Chicago. That probably had a lot to do with it. That was the only way CM Punk was going to get over as big as he was.
Oh, he would have been over regardless, I think. Maybe just not to that level, but he would have been the guy with the majority of the pops, I think.
Well, if you noticed on Raw, the crowd was not as good as the last few crowds have been in other areas. There are just some areas where it might not go well, and I think John Cena being the Hollywood star, he's going to look more powerful than CM Punk, and I think that by having Punk winning in Chicago with the crowd, with a reaction like that, you needed that to make him look good, to make him really, really get over. And, yeah, maybe they brought it back too quick, but, again, they're trying to sell a pay-per-view, and that's why they did it. And I'm sure Punk agreed to doing the match. Punk has to win SummerSlam, and it does look like they are building to Triple H versus CM Punk, which I personally would love to see. That's a pretty big match, in my opinion. But Raw has had some good wrestling over the past few weeks. They have to build their stars up, and especially that the summer's coming to an end, they need to start building some stars up so people can really relate to them, and that's what I think they have to do. And it's not only just about CM Punk and John Cena, it's about the rest of the roster, getting them up. It's a combination of that.
I'm noticing every summer around this time, right before SummerSlam, maybe one or two pay-per-views before, they do some kind of big angle. And whether it's the ECW thing a few years ago or the Nexus thing or the Punk thing. So maybe it's something else to throw out there for everybody. Maybe this is just a new thing that they do every year to get rid of that slow burn time between WrestleMania one year, WrestleMania the next, up into the Rumble when they start building. Maybe they're just trying every year to throw something radical out there.
Austin 316 happened in June. NWO started right around that time, too.
Yeah, again, but different time. I'm just talking about this modern era. I know you used your funny voice there, so you weren't mocking me. But the last maybe 5 years, pretty much every summer, I mean, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but at least the last 2 years, and counting that year when they brought ECW back and the year before when they did the ECW pay-per-view, seems to be something they do. They get worried that nobody's going to watch after WrestleMania, so they do a draft. And once the draft got old and people stopped caring about that, which nobody cares about now, now they do a big angle.
Now, because John Morrison will be re-signed on Raw by Triple H, and then his first match back is SmackDown.
Maybe the thing that nobody notices here is that the CM Punk thing is just another one of those get us through the summer angles, and by the time we get to WrestleMania, he'll be right back down the court. I keep thinking of like Randy Orton a few years ago, when Randy Orton was doing that thing when he had the legacy where he got involved with Stephanie and he beat her up, and that drew Triple H out, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, Randy Orton, he's going to be the next Austin. It's the next Austin because he's doing stuff that's controversial and it's not normal. Oh my God, he's the next Austin, and they should drag this out." And then he just was right back a notch below Cena by the next pay-per-view. So I'm just saying, don't be surprised, everybody. Don't get your hopes up.
Personally, I think the post-SummerSlam period from then until the Rumble is a lot fucking worse. That's got to be the area with less interest to me. But I don't know if it indicates anything. But apparently they've canceled the Blu-ray of Money in the Bank and will be just releasing a standard DVD, not a simultaneous release like they have been doing, which of all the B shows to get a Blu-ray, I think that would have been the one. But before we get to callers, one last panelist chiming in on the Punk angle, Coriander Ake.
Well, along the lines of the summer lull idea, Patrick G316 in our message board, our chat room said...
Well, he's on our message board, too. We all know Pat.
Well, he said to the summer lull idea, "Oh, no, not another Nexus." So, of course, this does beg the question, what if CM Punk grabs a necktie?
Sorry. Sorry, everybody. I didn't mean to make light of that. I ruined it.
That's okay. I'm definitely taking the stance that they called him back too soon. Now, I will admit I was wrong. 2 shows ago, I was all about Punk coming back to the Indies, and you guys, you were right. I was wrong. Punk's definitely not coming back. With that said, though, I think if they wanted to make this feel real, they should have dragged this out anywhere until SummerSlam or perhaps as long as Survivor Series, no longer than that. By calling him back this early, it makes me wonder, why did they call him back so soon? Why would they kill what is their hottest angle right now this fast?
Well, I don't know if kill's the right word.
Well, as you guys mentioned, it does smell a lot like the corporation storyline, which I was never a fan of. And it does seem rather suspicious that they call him back this early. We could have had a huge surprise at SummerSlam, and we could have done without that little area of Raw where we hot-shotted the title. I was kind of glad when Ray won, and then Cena takes the title back 2 hours later, not even.
A very Hogan-esque move, wasn't it?
Extremely Hogan-esque. Extremely. This is a match that should have happened at a pay-per-view. We could have held off on Miz and Ray until SummerSlam. I don't think anybody would have minded not having a champion until then. We've done it before.
Well, I'm a big Cena fan, as I've said on the show before, and I don't think it's necessarily the wrong move. I just question the timing of less than 2 hours instead of a little more like 2 weeks.
By making it so obvious that a lot of even casual fans knew Punk was going back, I don't know if this is going to last in the long term. I know that they want to keep the belt near Cena at least until WrestleMania. Do you guys think that Punk's just going to end up in that Jericho position where he's a hot commodity now and in 3 months from now he's back on the mid-cards?
I think he'll be on SmackDown. He'll probably be what Edge was or what Orton is now a year from now. I look at their plans over the next 2 years, and I'm seeing the most important thing to them right now is probably the Rock Cena match, and then second to that is getting to WrestleMania 30, which is going to be probably Undertaker winning his 20th match or losing his first. Punk ends up in the Cena top babyface position, but not there as long as Cena's on the same show, which means he'll be on SmackDown, and he'll be feuding with Mark Henry less than a year from now. So take that for what you will.
Well, I don't think Rock Cena, Punk Triple H, and an Undertaker match, if that's what's in the works, is the worst thing they could possibly do for WrestleMania either. But let's go to some calls. Area code of 813, I believe that might be Florida, but let's see. Name and location, please.
Yes, this is Jordan from Valrico, Florida. This whole thing with Punk is really creative laziness. I mean, the next step down in creative laziness from this would be like, oh, this is Jesus Christ coming down the aisle, and his opponent for SummerSlam is the devil. I mean, it's just as lazy as when you blur reality and fiction together. There's so many things that don't work. For example, like in the 1980s, they never talked about other companies. They never talked about, and they wonder why they're not successful. It's just so many little things in general that are just don't alike. But going back to the Strikeforce thing real quick, I just wanted to say that under a certain weight, I don't think women should be allowed to be MMA fighters, because obviously women don't have the physical muscle mass to knock each other out. And even with the men like Uriah Faber and those weight classes, they're so boring to watch because all they do is just move around really quickly. So I totally
disagree with you there.
I couldn't stand watching that, this girl's laying on top of each other and it was probably going to last for 5 rounds. I was thinking it was going to last for 5 rounds, and Dana White is, smart, in my opinion, for not having women at all. I can't watch somebody lay on each other like that, even if they are women. I'll just go watch porn. What's the point?
All right, well, I completely disagree with your MMA analysis there, Jordan, but let's move on. I believe we've got Ryan from Massachusetts returning to the show. Ryan?
Hey, it's been too long. I'm probably in the minority. Right move to bring, because, in Punk's opening promo...
We just missed you there. Your phone dipped out.
Well, I'm just saying I'm in the minority saying that Punk coming back is a good... In his opening promo, he said, even in the week I was gone, we've gone back to the status quo. And if we drag his absence out till Survivor Series, then it's just been the same old thing. And then people are going to lose interest again. And, Jim coming back would say, oh, hey, he's back, great. But it's, by then, a lot of people who just got interested again by this whole Summer of Punk 2 storyline would have been lost already because, from Money in the Bank to Survivor Series, it would have just been the same old thing over and over. Nothing really changed. I'm not saying it's a huge change, but it's still more interesting than if we still had Cena back on top. I like Ray and I like Miz, despite the vast majority is, but Punk coming back early was a good move because it keeps the interest going, even if they quote-unquote kills the storyline. That's just my 2 cents.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. Good to hear back from you. Next time, though, get a better phone reception because you're dipping in and out there. Ramon in Chicago, hello.
Hello, Eric.
Yes, sir. What's up?
It seems as if the WWE has become the master of ruining things. They ruined the Nexus angle last year, and now they turned something that I thought could have been a legendary wrestling angle into a 2-month blow-off. And now, even the 2-month blow-off seems to be lame. Why didn't they just announce that they were going to have a title versus title match at the beginning of the show and go from there? Instead, we have CM Punk calling Triple H pussy whooped, and then they wait until 3 minutes until Raw goes off the air to say that they're going to do the match at SummerSlam, and then they have the dueling wrestling thing going on, and it's just so fucking silly.
All right, so fucking silly, says Ramon in Chicago. Another one of our regulars, Abe in Augusta, Georgia. What's up?
Oh, yeah, Jordan, by the way, of course, on cover they cut you for that statement you made about women on MMA. But I know you're going to discuss the WCW Best of Nitro DVD in a few minutes.
Yes.
I believe in the panel we're talking about how maybe Debbie hates WCW. But if you watch this year and a lot of the pay-per-views like Capital Punishment or Extreme Rules, for example, equal Uncensored or Great American Bash, whatever you want to call it, do you think it's kind of ironic how much they bash WCW but use a lot of their ideas? You find that kind of ironic?
That's not even ironic. What's fucking ironic is that WWE can do the same fucking stupid mistakes that WCW does and get away with it. I've said it on the show before. I swear, if Ric Flair had done a dark match at Starrcade, WCW would have been fucking crucified for that and never would have been forgiven. people would still be bringing that up like the finger poke of doom as some shit to say about WCW. But WWE puts Ric Flair in a dark match at WrestleMania, no one even remembers. I just don't understand how it was always okay for them to do it, but not WCW. But anyway, 718 area code, name and location, please.
My name is Joe.
Hey, Joe, where are you from?
Brooklyn, New York.
All right, Joe from Brooklyn, what do you got to say?
The Punk storyline with John Cena was good when they did the promo, when he appeared to do the shoot. I thought it was probably one of the best promos I've heard in a long time. And I thought the build-up to Money in the Bank was actually really good. But then the next night I felt they completely ruined it with the whole Ray winning the title with the tournament, and then John being in later in the night, which I thought was complete BS. Because supposedly John's working hurt, and I think the smart thing is to give John time off so he can recover and come back better than he is right now. The Ray match was good. There's no doubt about that. But I thought they ruined it. And then Punk just walks out through the entranceway, which made no freaking sense.
In his wrestling gear with music and a Titantron.
Yeah, exactly. That made no freaking sense. Would have made more sense if he jumped in through the crowd and attacked them, or if they did a classic ECW thing where the lights went out, come back on, and then he hits him with the belt, steals his belt, oh, now I got both your belts, and you're still a loser, and runs off, or something like that.
We are being flooded with calls, which is great to see, of course. 585 area code, name and location, please.
Anthony, and I'm from the Bronx. I think they should have waited at least 90 days for the CM Punk thing to build up more, because it would have made the ratings go through the roof, because people would have been watching to see when CM Punk coming back. You know what I'm saying? They basically did to Rey Mysterio what WCW did to Sting in 1999, if you remember that. When he beat Diamond Dallas Page, it's basically on the Nitro DVD, but they didn't show Diamond Dallas Page beating Sting for in the second hour or whatever it was. So, I think they did Rey Mysterio dirty like that.
Ben from Austin, Texas, what's up?
Call me crazy, but am I the only one who thinks the CM Punk match was way better than AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels?
No.
I'm watching it, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just me, but I'm bored out of my mind. And usually with the TNA crowd, it's alive, yet the crowd seems dead. Maybe it's because Punk was in his hometown, but I felt more energy and a better match in Cena and Punk versus Styles and Daniels.
I don't think anyone else would disagree with you on that one. Royce in California, what's going on?
Oh, yeah, you were talking about how WCW gets ripped new ones for the same stupid stuff that WWE does. I think it's more certain wrestlers get away with stuff, because CM Punk did the whole work shoot thing, like I said a few weeks back. If Russo did that, everyone would still talk about it and still say it was horrible and all that and blah, blah, blah. I think they really should have held the Cena-Ray match till SummerSlam, because you're telling me that Cena-Ray for the title is a pay-per-view main event. It was like Hogan Warrior kind of for this iteration, and they blew it.
Lawrence said that before.
And they blew it on Raw, so I still don't get that.
Geez, so many calls. Thanks a lot for everyone calling in. I'm going to go to a couple more, and then we'll get to Nitro. Amato, that's who I was looking for. Amato in San Antonio, what's going on?
Woo, 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 what's up? I actually started watching that Zack Ryder stuff, and it's very entertaining. And they should put him on TV, as he's already getting put on TV. One of the things I wanted to talk about was the Johnny Ace thing. Grandpa waved towards JR like he was saying, hi, that I took your job, or, I have it now, so you're back stuck to commentary. I thought that was really cool. It's like the time period of CM Punk storyline was, we give him some time, let him do some more stuff. WWE likes to repeat themselves, as like all wrestling companies do. Why couldn't he do a Matt Hardy type storyline where he runs in and whoops Cena and he takes Cena's belt, and Cena gets a new belt every week, and then CM Punk just finds another way to beat him up and take that belt, or something cool like that. No matter how many belts y'all give him, I'm the real WWE champion. I love the Ray match with Cena. I didn't like the whole fact that it's like they said when Hogan fought Goldberg in Atlanta in the Georgia Dome on Nitro, if they would have had it the pay-per-view, they would have made a ton of money, and they would have had a bunch of ratings. The pay-per-view wise would have been out of the roof, and they gave it away on free TV. So, is McMahon giving away free title matches on Raw? It really didn't make sense that they should have the tournament. They should have the tournament and finished it up at SummerSlam, and then have Punk do a run without no music, or just come in and whoever won just knock him out and take his title. And then you had a whole other month leading up to be like, well, where did he come from? He's not, and still not mention his name, but be more like, that guy ran in, and what's, Triple H going to do about this guy, and what are we going to do about the WWE Championship? And more of a mysterious, he keeps popping up because we know he's still here. What are we going to do with it? And have a big blow-off at Survivor Series. They could have had him do a lot of run-ins and still made it a big thing.
It's funny you say that they gave away the title match, because people will always say, well, the ratings don't matter anymore because there's only one company, and that's not how television works. They get advertising money for ratings. The more ratings they have, the bigger the audience, the more advertisers are going to pay for it. So they still are in that Monday night mentality, though, that maybe they feel ever since the Monday Night Wars they have to give away pay-per-view quality stuff, even though they're not actually competing with anybody. They want to keep people watching. I guess that's the only logic I could see. And one more call before we move on to Monday Nitro. And that is 914 area code. Name and location, please. You're on with Roundtable Radio.
I'm calling from Wayne, New Jersey.
Wayne, New Jersey. What's up?
Yeah, so
I assume your name's not Wayne.
No. Well, anyway, I was watching.
All right,
Raw
you're
last
unknown
night,
from Wayne, New Jersey.
No, my name is Clark.
All right, Clark. What's up?
I was watching Raw last night, and when CM Punk came on, John Cena came on, they did the whole, CM Punk raised his title and his music was starting to hit, his old school RH team was starting to hit, and Cena's title, he raised his title up, and that was, I thought it was pretty cool, you know what I mean? I thought it was cool because they were hyping up the storyline, you know what I mean? But if they have a good match at SummerSlam as they did at Money in the Bank, it'd be pretty awesome. It was pretty cool. I like the fact that they brought Punk back, you know what I mean? I thought it was pretty cool. For the Monday Nitro DVD, I haven't really seen the DVD yet.
Well, I hope you do, because it's an important piece of wrestling history. And thanks to all our callers, we're going to move on to the very best of Monday Nitro. It's not just the DVD, it's also available on Netflix, Lawrence. And I'm glad you joined us for this, because WCW's come up a lot tonight, funny enough, after our mixed reviews from our callers about Raw the night before, and the panel, no less. But Will Vafides had this DVD set and returned it, which shows me that in addition to not knowing Jack Evans, he doesn't really care about wrestling history, right, Will Vafides?
Exactly.
Well, I just couldn't imagine giving it up, because the problem with the DVD, or the whatever you want to call this collection of matches, is that there's not a lot of context given for things. And as we go along talking about this stuff, you're going to see what we mean. But regardless of the presentation as it was, just the fact that we have these important pieces of wrestling history alone in a collection of DVD form, some of it, some questionable, sure, but some of the key pieces are there. And last time we talked about this a few shows ago, we got midway through the first disc, and we're going to pick up again from the first disc, because that is pretty much the beginning of the NWO era. You know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here. And, of course, Nash's debut, not even debut, they were actually returning to WCW, excuse me, but their reappearances a couple weeks apart, laying the groundwork for the original American Invasion storyline. And any memories of Hall and Nash's returns to WCW, Lawrence, which sparked a lawsuit over the copyright infringement, because they were pretty much doing the Razor Ramon and Diesel characters.
Wow. Well, I still have the Punk thing on my brain, but since that's kind of fresh, it's going to influence my response here a bit. And that is, when that happened, it was completely unexpected to me. People at the time had access to the dirt sheets, if you will, and some people knew that was going to happen. Others knew simply that their contracts were up and they might sign with WCW. I'm sure plenty of people thought they might go to Japan or something for a while, but for me, at that time, I was a somewhat smart young fan, and nonetheless, when Scott Hall showed up, I was completely surprised in every possible way. And the same thing when Kevin Nash showed up the following week. I'm like, what is going on here? This seems completely real. The fact that he came through the stand, he was in street clothes, Scott Hall, and Nash too. The fact that it was in the middle of a show, in the middle of a jobber match that was irrelevant to whatever storyline was the main storyline on Nitro that night. That moment, at the time, my emotion was not, this is the biggest thing that's ever happened. It wasn't, this is shocking. It was just like, what is going on here? And when you have that rare feeling in wrestling, the what is going on here feeling, which I had when Punk started mouthing off a couple weeks ago, the Nexus showed up last year. I had that feeling a couple times watching ECW over the years. Whenever I had that feeling, which is what is going on, that is the most exciting feeling you can have as a wrestling fan. And it's not in that TNA way where it's like, what's going on? It's like a different what's going on. Not me. I have no idea what's going on because it doesn't make any sense. It's the excitement of the fact that for that moment, that company has lightning and they've got it in a bottle. And the question is, are they going to keep it in the bottle or are they going to let it escape? The thing that WCW did, and I'll let you go into the detail here, is they kept the lightning in the bottle and they let that grow week after week. They kept that momentum going. And the way that they did that is they did it in small increments. It was like a slow burn. They gave you a little bit each week. And then the pay-per-view, they'd have a big revelation, such as Bischoff going through the table, or Hogan showing up and doing the big heel turn, or Sting in the War Games. That storyline was a slow burn of a lot of moments where you said, what's going on? And you never quite knew what was going on, which meant you never quite knew what was going to happen next, which meant you had to tune in every single week and enjoy it. And that is what we're missing now, and I think that's what the Punk angle is missing, because now it's back to predictable television again. So that is how I felt when Hall showed up, how I felt when Nash showed up, and it's a feeling that I was able to keep pretty much watching WCW during that whole period, in that period where they started to become the number one wrestling company in the world, and how soon people forget.
I like how at the beginning of the show we mentioned Triple H's line to Punk last night about your skinny, fat ass. That wasn't the first verbal gas that a Click member had, because one of the greatest of all time was when Nash was saying to Bischoff, this is where the big boys play, huh? Look at the adjective, play. It's a verb. I love when you're trying to sound smart and you sound dumb. Orlando, memories of Hall and Nash's debut in the NWO angle that unfolded.
Oh, man, when Hall and Nash first came, they didn't really give any long explanations of why they were there or long promos. It was kind of bits and pieces, which means we had to tune in every single week to see what happened, which means we bought the pay-per-views to see the blow-offs, and they kept furthering the angle. That's what they missed with the whole CM Punk angle, just to refer back to that. But, of course, as a kid back then, growing up a WWF fan, Razor Ramon and Diesel were a big deal. And to see them on the rival, WCW, I didn't know that they were on WCW because I didn't watch WCW before the Monday Nitro. So I didn't know that they were on WCW. I thought that they were invading WCW, as a lot of people did back then also, because...
Well, that was the idea.
Yeah, exactly, and it was the Razor Ramon character, then Diesel's coming in, and then at Bash at the Beach, the one thing that nobody ever saw coming, Hulk Hogan turns heel. And that's wrestling history in a nutshell right there, and that started the whole boom, and like Lauren said again, that's what started the whole boom of WCW becoming the number one promotion in the world.
The good thing about that whole thing was, number one, there was no internet at the time. You really couldn't. Oh, and how many people were on wrestling news websites about that? 7 people. So there you go. So compared to, no one had any idea that was happening. People can now, today, with Twitter and Facebook, they can figure out things, or they can...
They haven't figured out shit about the Punk stuff like we just spent the first portion of the show talking about.
They can figure out if he's coming back. They can see if he arrives in the arena. They can report things before shows happen. And when something like that happens, when it was only a small 10-minute thing, like they said, in the middle of the show,
it was
you
more
don't
like
care
2.
about the rest of the show. If the rest of that show, it doesn't matter anymore. That was the moment that really stood out. And that's when people from WWE was like, whoa, wait a minute. Why is Razor Ramon showing up on WCW? And again, it was a nice slow build. That was what was great about that. They put time into that. And wrestling today is kind of rushed, where back in the day, you could time those things out because you knew you had something there, and as long as you truly believe in it, you can let it go out that long. And that whole thing went out for years because it led to Sting, it led to Hogan and Sting, it led to a lot of things. So that one moment led to a huge storyline that lasted so long. So it's amazing how that one moment of just Scott Hall showing up made a big difference in the wrestling industry. So that's what made that stand out.
Before I jump into the NWO talk, Caligula in the chat room wanted to know what you guys thought, you specifically, Eric, what you guys think of there being 2 spinner belts on Raw in case one wasn't enough.
I don't think anything of it. There's going to be one soon enough anyway. But let's see what you think about the Hall and Nash's debut on the Nitro set and the subsequent NWO angle.
I remember just being so shocked when that happened, because I believe it was like right after a major WWF pay-per-view when that happened, and I pop on Nitro and here comes Hall and Nash, and I'm like, holy crap, how'd they let you in? It was one of those surreal moments where you remember where you were the minute it happened. You remember what you were thinking that day. And I'm glad that it's perfectly preserved on the Nitro set. However, I personally feel that they dragged the NWO out a little bit too far. Like, after Starrcade the following year, it was just like, okay, why are you guys here again, and how come there's like 15 people in the NWO?
Well, that's getting a little ahead of ourselves, and that's another story. But as far as the NWO goes, at the beginning, like, everyone's been pretty much saying week after week there was another chapter to this great story. And the funny thing is, on this Nitro set, they didn't even include some of the best stuff. I mean, yes, what we did see was really good. Hall and Nash coming down the aisle, coming down through the fans during the multi-man tag that Harlem Heat won the belts and no one even noticed because here are the fucking outsiders, and the subtle touch of a maybe not so subtle, but the close-up of the police in the ring with their hands on the gun, just trying to get across how big of a threat these two guys were. You see heels and faces align for the first time against an outside threat. They're unified under the WCW banner, and like I said, as the weeks went by, more and more chapters unfolded. Hogan, of course, turning heel, and the subsequent beatdowns of the NWO, it really, in retrospect, especially since, Lawrence, we sat through the short and not that great incarnation of the NWO and the WWF right before they became WWE, doesn't it really perfectly illustrate how in a bubble Vince McMahon is as far as his own creations? He really doesn't understand or grasp what appeals about anyone else's, because here's 3 guys, Hogan, Hall, and Nash. We're in the midst of, holy shit, Razor and Diesel in WWF, plus Hogan's heel turn. Just mind-blowing shit, all embodied in 3 guys. And they're able to fend off and beat down not just the entire 4 Horsemen, not just the entire Dungeon of Doom, but also Sting and Luger and whoever the fuck else might have been in that match. 3 guys holding off the entire goddamn company. And then years later, Austin can beat up all 3 of them by himself. Doesn't it just really perfectly show how Vince McMahon doesn't understand an outside source?
This is why the worst thing that ever happened to wrestling was the fact that Vince McMahon bought WCW. Here's a question, 2-part question, quick question for everybody. Who's the biggest star in wrestling history?
Hulk Hogan,
right? Maybe Steve Austin. Who's the second biggest star? Steve Austin. Okay, done. There's your answer, right? Both of them did not come from the WWE. And yet Vince McMahon, maybe reluctantly at first, maybe not so much with Hogan, but definitely with Austin, he completely got behind him and said, this is my company, these are my guys, I'm so proud, let's make $1 million, $1 billion. Randy Savage, Roddy Piper, Ricky Steamboat. After the Bruno Sammartino era, basically it was open season on Vince Sr. and then Vince Jr. bringing in other people's talent to become the top stars. That stopped as soon as he bought WCW. As soon as he bought WCW, he said, you know what, I have to prove to the world that my homemade creations are better. And that's why he started to really drive the point home that everybody that wasn't a WWE character creation, straight through developmental, all the way up. And in some cases, they had to also be second-generation WWE guys. That if those guys were not his guys, they were going to have to work twice as hard, twice as long, and have to catch lightning in a bottle to have a prayer of even being anywhere near a championship. And so to this very day, yes, you're right. He's really trapped himself in that level. And again, not to go back to CM Punk, it takes so much for a guy like Punk to get over. He has to have such an extreme storyline with such ridiculous elements to it, when realistically he's good enough to just go out there and do his shtick and become a star. You know, people knew that when he first came in to WWE, when he was on ECW on Sci-Fi.
He should have been a star years ago.
People saw right away. They said, "Oh my God, this guy's awesome. He's old school. He just submits people. He's a hard worker and all this stuff." He didn't need any gimmick. He didn't need anything, and he was ready to go. And I remember that year in the Survivor Series, he teamed with DX and the Hardys, and he got the biggest pop.
They should have called that Team Over.
Team Over, but Vince pulled back because he said, "You know what? He's not one of mine. He's not one of my guys," and that's why.
King of the Indies was the label.
And it's not the PG era that's killing wrestling. It's not the lack of new stars even. It's just the fact that he can't get past the idea that something that he did not 100% create is what needs to be presented as the most important thing. And it's amazing to me because I go back to my first point about this, which is Hogan and Austin. Hulk Hogan, the biggest star in wrestling, the guy that made his company, that made the WWE, came right from the AWA, using the exact same gimmick, the exact same catchphrases, the exact same moves, the exact same everything. Vince literally just plucked him up from the AWA and moved him over from Minnesota to New York and made him a star and took his. And at no point did Vince say, "I have to pull back on Hogan because he's not my star. I have to have Andre beat him because Andre's my star." It was the opposite. It was the complete opposite.
Well, back on the Nitro set, we talk about, as the caller mentioned before, Punk coming out with his gear and his music and all that other stuff, and that taking away from the realism. Well, what about the realism? If you want to talk about an angle done realistically, if you remember the Disney taping, Lawrence, where they launched that attack in the back that Jimmy Hart ran out during the middle of a Horseman match, it's the Outsiders, it's the Outsiders, and then Mysterio ended up getting spiked into the trailer. I mean, if there's a word that could really embody the NWO angle at that point, it was chaos. Just in that segment alone, which I think actually went over 2 segments, because first, in the middle of this match, out of nowhere, you cut to the back, and people are beat up. Scotty Riggs beat up, and Mysterio gets spiked into the trailer. They jump in a limo. There's a third guy, that seed plant right there. It was just 3 people. Mysterio said it was 3 of them. And then Savage jumps on the limo as it's leaving. The ambulance shows up because apparently someone called because they thought it was a real beatdown from a gang or something. And they come to the back, and woman's crying, and it was just perfectly done. And that's just the sort of thing that you see on the Nitro set that was really good, which leads to Sting's last promo as the Surfer Sting, let's say. He had brown hair at that point, but of course we don't see the context of a lot of it. We see the angle where there was the fake Sting in the limo, which was a great way to end Nitro, where DiBiase is talking to, I guess they were playing a recording of Sting's voice or whatever in the rain, and then holy shit, it's Sting. And you really couldn't tell for that first night. And then the whole juxtaposition of everyone's turned on Sting in his career and now no one trusts him. It was just really well done how he even had his back to the hard cam the whole time, and that was the last we saw of him, and I'll be popping up from time to time. And like I said, we didn't even see a lot of the brilliant stuff, like speaking of DiBiase, like when he showed up on Nitro, his debut in WCW, coming down the aisle again during someone else's match and held up the 4 fingers and said next week 5. What a perfect swerve.
Absolutely. Again, the idea, anything can happen at any time, and you don't know what's going to happen. And it's the element of surprise. It's the element of debuting new characters, having them interact with the existing characters. And also, one of the great things about all of the great wrestling storylines, any wrestling storyline, is continuity. Whether it's Michaels and Undertaker, Brett McMahon, or Austin, all of these great storylines have always had continuity with some historical context, but not in a shoot kind of way. Like the Punk thing is like shoot. That whole deal with Sting, the continuity, like you said, that's a great point, which is that Sting referenced the point everyone knew that everybody always turns on Sting, but now the one time that all the evidence presented suggests that the NWO is trying to trick us, everyone, including his best friend, who has turned on him, talking about Luger, 4 or 5 times, doesn't trust him now, which led perfectly, of course, into the next play, or the next swerve in the storyline, which was Sting becoming this character, this enigmatic, mysterious character that could either be NWO or WCW. And the idea that now it was possible for Sting to be in the NWO was so intangible and interesting to people that they had to tune in, because if it were now in WWE and it was Cena, you'd just know that Cena would be a good guy wearing a new color the next week. Whereas with Sting, and I guess the colors are a good metaphor because he did the same kind of thing, you didn't know. You didn't know if he was wearing black and white because he was with the NWO. Because those were his
And Heenan
colors.
pointed out immediately, he's like, when he first showed up as the Crow Sting, if you remember, he beat up the NWO Sting,
right.
And the rest of the NWO came in, like, they didn't even give a fuck. Like, they just let him out there as the bait for the real Sting, and he cut that great promo, which led to the infamous line when they offered him a deal, and he said, I might not be in your price range. The only thing that's for sure about Sting is nothing's for sure. And Heenan points out this, as he would come to be known, the Crow Sting, he was wearing black and white, NWO colors, details
and continuity. And that's, again, any book or movie that people like, it's always, everything relates to everything else. It makes sense. As it goes along, there's a logical steps that the story takes. And they may not be predictable. They don't have to be predictable to be logical. And that's what made the NWO work. Even though you didn't know what was going to happen, everything that happened up to a certain point made perfect sense.
Well, they skip ahead there to when Eric Bischoff turned heel, and this was after Roddy Piper had come back to the company, which, again, was, we talked about Sting and Luger Lawrence and how they changed the dynamic there. Well, Hogan and Piper in the 80s were the faces of the Rock and Wrestling connection in the WrestleMania time period, except now Piper's the face and Hogan's the heel. The matches weren't great, sure, but the drama and the characters were, I think. And this, months later, like I said, and again, Will Vafidas, there's a problem here where you'd think that they would set, especially with DDP hosting in between the segments, they would set things up more with some clips or explain things better. They kind of leave you high and dry in some cases, but in this one, Eric Bischoff turned out to be a mole and part of the NWO, and this was the first instance that I remember, at least on the national stage, of the figurehead of the promotion essentially being a heel. This was over a year before Vince McMahon used the Montreal Screwjob as the catalyst for the Mr. McMahon character, and a lot of people always say Bischoff is a great performer. He gets the obnoxious and arrogance in his, I guess, real-life persona across on TV as a hateable character, and holy shit. They may have bleeped when Piper said, "You son of a bitch," but the drama was really there, like, holy shit, Bischoff too? What'd you think of that, Vafidas?
I never got to see the whole promo on that. I saw the Nitro when they had the Monday Night War DVD. That's when they kind of had that. They had that night in a nice order with the NWO. And when it goes from September to November, it's kind of like, what happened in October? You know? So
well, there was a lot of
happened?
stuff we didn't get to see.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff we missed, and Roddy Piper coming back, it's like, oh, Roddy Piper's back. Okay. Again, you look at it from a perspective that someone did not watch WCW or someone did not understand the storyline. It was a big moment for them, absolutely. But on this DVD, it's like a clip thrown in, and you don't know why.
It seems as if they made this strictly for people who had watched it in the first place.
Yeah, I think they catered to an audience of that, because then again, who buys the DVDs? Probably mostly people who didn't watch the shows.
Well, you know what? Judging by the numbers that they've sold so far, it hasn't been doing too well compared to their other releases lately, and maybe that's why.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows that, like I said, I returned mine, and just for the fact that there was something missing on that DVD that didn't make me want to keep it or watch it again. And plus, I got it on Netflix now anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, that was a good part of it, but like I said, missing some stuff in the middle.
In that respect, I do agree that there are a few things missing. I know that DDP is petitioning to have another Best of Nitro set released, and I hope the petition goes through.
Does petitioning mean tweeting?
Tweeting, petitioning, whatever works, really. I hope that for his sake it does work, because there's a lot missing, like his feud with Macho Man. I thought that was stellar. That's
funny, because with this set being so DDP heavy, they didn't cover that, which made DDP.
True. I think they wanted to temper that to make it look like, oh, I'm just the host. I'm not going to eat up the entire set. This is not the DDP story. But that's just a personal opinion. The first disc ends with Mysterio and Malenko, and I was very surprised that was on the set. That was a very nice surprise.
What's so surprising about that? Mysterio's with the company, and he's pretty much the only cruiserweight they have, so there's a lot of Mysterio matches on here. That's not surprising to me at all.
Well,
and Malenko's still there, too.
Well, true, but Malenko's there in a road agent capacity, and most of the kids that might see this DVD set with their moms or their older siblings, they are used to the way Ray looks now. They're not used to Ray
pre-juiced,
not puffy, not hobbling, no tattoos.
Not as tattooed.
It's like a reverse Randy Orton kind of thing.
It's like Sin Cara with hope. So I'm surprised that they left that in. And like I said, it's a very nice surprise. I think that although they took so much out, they did put in a lot that I didn't expect to see again.
On the DVD, they skipped some of the stuff that happened in September. On a Nitro, they had Benoit and McMichael go against Sting and Luger, because Sting and Luger were taking the Horseman spot in the War Games match, and then this led to the NWO coming down, beating everybody up. And then the Giant came down, and the NWO was scared of the Giant. Then the Giant turned and became part of the NWO, and I thought at that point that's when the NWO kind of was going to be a little watered down, because WCW for a whole year had been building up the Giant as this monster, and now he was a part of the NWO, and he was trying to act all cool and high-five and with the shades on, and I didn't really buy the Giant as that character, and I don't think they did either, because in that January, then they turned him back face, and he was like a monster for WCW to go against the NWO. But I think they should have had him in that position the whole time, because putting the Giant with them just made them that much more stronger, and it didn't really look balanced, because now Sting wasn't a part of WCW, and it was just the whole NWO, and they didn't really have anybody fighting. And then Piper comes, and I didn't see Piper as a viable opponent for the NWO. I thought he was past his prime, and I didn't really buy too much into the Hogan-Piper thing, and it wasn't until they started feuding with Piper and then Sting started showing up sporadically that I started buying into the whole NWO angle all over again.
Lawrence, any thoughts on what the cruiserweights meant to the WCW product, and why is it that they still get talked about today?
The cruiserweights were able to draw in a lot of the smart fans at that time. Obviously, everybody, everybody, kids, adults, loved the NWO thing because it had something for everybody. It had the cool stuff which teenagers liked, the shades and the black T-shirts and the gang mentality. It had the 80s WWF guys, which of course the older fans were liked, and they felt like they could probably say they're Hogan fans again, because now they don't have to wear ridiculous red and yellow. Although I'm proud of my red and yellow, they now could wear an NWO shirt, and that would make them a Hogan fan. But the cruiserweights made it okay, and it made it cool for the internet fans to watch the show because they see those guys on lucha tapes, and they see them in ECW. Certainly, Mysterio and Malenko and Guerrero and all those guys had some of the best matches in ECW, and in a lot of ways, kind of make people wax poetic about how great the work rate was in ECW was mostly because of the cruiserweight. So I think that was their function. I think that's why internet fans are so immediately say the cruiserweights are great. I mean, honestly, at the time, to me, the cruiserweights, what they functioned as, from my viewing habit, they were the mid-card. They were the jobber matches, but they were much better jobber matches than the WWF had in the 80s on Superstars. The Nitro jobber match, the jobber match of the next millennium, was a high-flying train wreck kind of match with really good workers, as opposed to like a 290-pound fat guy with a goofy neon tights losing to Coco Beware. So that's, to me, what the cruiserweights were in WCW. I'm not saying that's all they were, but they made every part of the show somewhat fun to watch, even the jobber matches, even the matches that didn't mean anything to the main event. Because people have to admit to themselves, generally speaking, the cruiserweights had nothing to do with the main event part of the show. They weren't part of that storyline. They were in their own little thing each week, and that's kind of what they represented. So I think people blow it out of proportion a little bit, but I also think it was a cool spin on the style of programming that the WWF and the NWA had in the 80s, which was the jobber matches leading up to the main event. They just took the jobber matches and they made them a little more fun, so people were invested in those matches a little bit.
See, I don't know if I'd agree with calling them jobber matches, because clearly they had those. Obviously, we were talking about Hall's debut before, and that was with
Mike Enos
and the other half of Well Done and sort of shit. Like, no one remembers that shit. But we're talking about a guy, Mysterio, who just won the title. He's a main eventer, big star in WWE. So I think they obviously had that potential should they have chosen to go that route. But obviously they had other plans. And I don't think, I mean, obviously there were jobbers in the cruiserweight division, so to speak, Liz Mark Jr. types and Cyclopes or whatnot. But even if you look at how they featured Malenko and Mysterio and the Psychosis Juventud sort of matches, I think it was part of their strategy, and that's what made WCW for those at least couple years between 96 and 98 to me the best wrestling show ever, because it's a great variety show. I always felt that wrestling should be a variety show, really, for all different tastes and styles. That's why I say, as you do, that PG isn't the problem, the writing is, because PG is not an excuse for bad writing. Good writing will always triumph overall, and I don't think you have to cater just to kids or just to the internet or whatever. There should be a fine balance for all. And as Jericho elaborated on that Monday Night War DVD that Will Fides mentioned before, it's what we pretty much knew all these years. What was great about WCW was the variety, in the sense that at the top, we just mentioned Piper and Hogan were past their prime. Well, yeah, Piper after hip surgery and whatever isn't going to have matches where he's doing Hurricane Ranas and springboards and stuff, but those main event characters, which were primarily older guys, a lot of them ex-WWE stars and whatever. Obviously, guys like Savage could still go and whatever, but others like Hogan and the Outsiders might have been just collecting a paycheck half the time. But they were put, those characters, in interesting scenarios with new spins, and they were doing interesting things. Picking up the action end, you had the younger guys in the mid-card, and I think that's what we said on the show earlier in our run in the first couple seasons was WCW's problem, is that it got to the point where they exhausted those functions and they needed to start juxtaposing and integrating the younger guys into the main event, and they did not do that. But back to what I was saying about the variety show, I really think that if you look back on it, Nitro is the wrestling show for the wrestling fan, because whatever style or kind of wrestler you're a fan of, they had that. If you liked Lucha, they had the Luchadors. If you liked hardcore wrestling, they had guys like Public Enemy and other wrestlers from ECW. If you liked old WWF guys, they had that. If you liked even the old NWA, they had Flair and the Steiners and Luger and Sting representing the old school. They had new stars eventually like Goldberg and Jericho and etc. And even AWA guys, Bischoff would have his old Zbyszko and Hennig and Hall friends in there from AWA. So really, even European and Japanese wrestlers, they had the talent trade with New Japan. Corey mentioned on the last time we talked about Nitro the Regal and Finlay match, and they just had everything. So we only have a few minutes left, and again, we just got through the first disc of Nitro, and I'd really love to talk some more about WCW and the other content on the second discs, but I guess we're going to have to save that for another day. So I hope you come back and listen to some further in-depth discussion on essentially what is the history of the Monday Night War with WCW on the Nitro end anyway, because this is a great collection, and I think any wrestling fan should have it.
The defining moment for me in Nitro history was not the dummy Sting falling through the ring and Nash hitting it with a bat, which is the funniest thing I've ever seen, but it was Goldberg beating Hogan, because that was the pinnacle of the Monday Night Wars. That represented so much of where wrestling could have gone. Looking back at that in hindsight, what could have been. There could have been Austin and Goldberg for the next 10 years, the two biggest stars in two major companies, head-to-head every week. But unfortunately, the combination of Hulk Hogan's ego and Vince McMahon's ego killed it for everybody.
It's still shocking to me that Nitro has been gone this whole time. The way this is presented on the DVD set, it still feels like it just happened last night. It's still epic after all these years, and that's a testament to the writing style of WCW 96 and 97.
This one was really good. A good debut. It shows where they were heading. And yeah, Battle of the Wills doing great. I can't wait for the next show to be on the air. So stay tuned later on this week. We will have the next episode, and I cannot wait. You will enjoy it, folks. All
right, thanks a lot. And thanks to all our callers. We had more callers than we probably ever have, which is great. So tune in 2 more weeks. We'll be back talking about UFC 133, TNA Hardcore Justice 2011, the first Ring of Honor on Sinclair Broadcasting taping in Chicago, and SummerSlam 2011 and more. Join us for more on the message board and WrestlingRoundtable.com. Get the T-shirt at our shop and go to our Amazon store. So for the panel of Rodney LeConte, Will Brooks, Will Valfides, Orlando O'Neill, Coriander Ake, Lawrence Haber, and the callers, I'm Eric Santamaria. Join us on WrestlingRoundtable.com.